Okay, so let's see. Previous installment, we were talking a little bit about truckload type shipments. Truckloads, obviously, big, a whole bunch of stuff inside of a truck. However, sometimes you don't have all of that stuff to send out. Okay. And that means that you're probably going to have to employ another type of shipper. Okay. And what that means is that you are going to need to contact what's known as an LTL carrier. You've got more than probably makes sense to send something via UPS. If it's something nice and small that you can fit in one box, five, six, seven boxes, you send it UPS. If you've got maybe 60 boxes on 3 or 4 different pallets, that's when you got to start thinking about using an LTL carrier. And when you talk about LTL carriers, you have to talk about pups. Pups, you say? What is a pup? Well, let me tell you. Let's bounce over here and take a look here. When I say pup, I mean nothing about dog. Okay, when I talk about pups, we've got these things. These are short trailers that are employed by LTL companies that are small and are used for moving shipments in between terminals of a specific LTL company. Okay, you can oftentimes link them together. If you are a shipper, they might leave one sitting at your dock door that you can load directly, and then they just come on in and grab it and take it away. But it's using these pups that you see here, and there's all sorts of pups. We've got more right here, pups. Okay, I mean, there's certain parts of the United States, like Nebraska, where you can link together 3 of them, but out here in beautiful Kentucky, you can only do 2 of them. Okay, but these are pup trailers. Okay, and these are employed by LTL carriers. A 53-foot truck is very common for truckload carriers. Each one of these is generally right around 50, pardon me, each one of them is around 24 to 26 feet in length. So, linking them together, you have got essentially one 53-foot trailer. Okay, so let's talk about a couple things, and before you know it, we will be done. How do we possibly get this word LTL? Okay, I mentioned that truckload carriers can sometimes be abbreviated as TL carriers, and that makes a lot of sense. You've got truck, and then you've got load, so you've got T and anyway, T and L. Okay, but now you've got LTL. Okay, and it means less than a full truckload. So where in the heck do we get LTL out of less than a full truckload? I'm not exactly sure where it comes from, but it makes a lot more sense than an LFTL. Anyway, so regardless, smaller freight, so smaller quantities of freight end up on LTL carriers, okay, less than a full truckload. Whereas truckload carriers, it makes a lot of sense to just get an entire full trailer. And when we talk about a full trailer, it usually starts to make a lot of sense for a shipper to get a full trailer when we're talking somewhere in the neighborhood of about 20. Okay, and you can jam probably all the way up to about 52 pallets onto a truck if you do it the right way and you have the right type of freight that you can stack on top of things. But if you've got a smaller type of, uh, of quantity of freight, you would probably be better off served by using an LTL carrier. When you have smaller quantities of freight, generally in the neighborhood of somewhere between 1 to 10 pallets, okay? It's not always a 100% slam dunk that you're going to use an LTL carrier if you have 1 to 10 pallets, but we'll talk through some of that, okay? So here would be a truckload. Okay, again, 24 to 26 pallets. You count them out, there's 24 to 26 pallets. Picture them as opposed to being double stacked, however, picture them as being side by side. Okay, if you double stacked every single one of the pallets and you had 26 of them, I don't know how many you got here, but actually, what do you got here? You got 12, so you got 48 if they're side by side and double stacked. Okay, so you'd have 48 here. But generally, you start to get around 20, and it makes sense to get a truckload. So, less than a truckload is something much less. When you start to eclipse about a quarter of one of these 53-foot trailers, money wise, it starts to make a lot of sense to send it via LTL as opposed to buying an entire trailer and renting a driver to take it door to door. Okay. So let's continue on and talk about a couple of things. Okay. When you are an LTL carrier company, there's a couple things that you need to think of. Okay. If you're an LTL carrier company, your business is smaller quantities of freight. And one of the reasons that smaller quantities of freight is your thing is because your job is trying to attract customers that have that small quantity of freight that will easily fit on these smaller types of trailers. And one of the ways that they do that is they incentivize it for the shippers. Okay, maybe the first pallet that you have is going to cost you, as you see here, $298. Okay, it's probably a decent price for a single pallet. But to make you continue to ship with them and to ship with you, period, they charge you for a second pallet, maybe $258. Maybe the third pallet, they only charge you $215. But when you get to the point where you start to have less than when you start to have more than 6 pallets, it's at that point where the carriers are going to actually try to say, no, we're not interested in having you send your freight with us. We're going to refer you to someone else, or we have a different type of carrier in our business that we can refer you to. Okay. So imagine if you had 20 some pallets and the price was being driven down pallet by pallet by pallet by pallet. By the time you got to the 20th pallet, it would be hardly anything. So that's not going to make them any money, and it's not going to really fit their business model because they're trying to work with smaller types of shipments. Okay. Thus, LTL. Okay. So, now, we talked about there might be some refusal or some pushback, okay? Why? As I said, it's all about the money, okay? They want to make money. They want to make money off of the shipper, okay? And they do that by charging for smaller quantities of freight, okay? Now, when you start to think about things like costs, an ideal situation for an LTL carrier would be something like this. Now, this is the wrong size type of truck, but you can see where this is going when you start to look at the price. Let's say you've got 3 different shippers where you have got a trailer like that. Maybe this is not a pup type of trailer, but this is a trailer. And if you can imagine, you have a whole bunch of customers shipping 1 or 2 pallets as opposed to one customer shipping 20, 30, 40 pallets. Okay. They make their money off of charging for small quantities of freight, and their dream scenario is everybody shipping 1 pallet a piece. So they've got a whole trailer full of a single pallet. Okay, that's their dream scenario. Okay, but it's all about the money. Okay, so a couple of things. It's not 100% awesome to be shipping stuff LTL. There's a lot of good stuff about shipping LTL or less than a full truckload. I mean, it's going to be definitely cheaper than getting yourself an entire full dry van to load up your pallets on. Okay. They are cheaper. Okay. When you're only shoving maybe 1 to 2 pallets to a particular customer. After that, another positive about that is they have capacity to handle these types of shipment. Lots of the larger LTL carriers that service Northern Kentucky and various parts of the United States, these are big companies. Okay, shipping is big business, and it does not really allow lots of smaller trucking companies to develop. There's just too intense of competition, and these trucks are not cheap. Now, not as expensive as an airplane, like we did talk about a couple days ago, but still expensive just the same. Now, it's all roses when you're shipping things via LTL. Well, not exactly. Okay. A couple things that you need to think about. As opposed to a truckload carrier, which is sending something to the door, they're picking it up at your dock door and moving it all the way to your customer's dock door. There's no stopping. They just go straight there. The driver, he may have to take a break, but the driver just goes nonstop, and lo and behold, he shows up there. That's not the case with LTL carriers, okay? Now, you can pay exorbitant amounts of money and you can get something there the very next day the way a truckload carrier can. However, that's generally not what most shippers are interested in doing. Generally, when you're shipping LTL, the types of service that you're going to be getting are shipments are going to be taking 2, maybe 3 days. They oftentimes have maps that they will show their customers, and they will say, if you are shipping to this area from here in beautiful northern Kentucky, it will allow us to get you the freight there in 1 day. It's a 1 day service point. Or it might be 2 days. It's a 2 day service point. Or maybe you want to send something all the way to Nevada. That might be a 3 or perhaps a 4 day service point for them. Okay. So it's definitely a slower mode of transportation. And one of the reasons that it is slower is these individual pups are moved around from various terminals that these companies, these LTL carrier companies, actually have. Okay, they do not make a beeline from Florence, Kentucky, where one carrier is located, and take it immediately to, I don't know, they might not take it immediately to Missouri. Okay, it might go to Indianapolis. They might load it onto a truck here in northern Kentucky. They might take that truck up to Indianapolis, pair it up with a bunch of other stuff that's going towards Missouri, and then they send it to another terminal that is in Missouri. At that point, they break that trailer apart and put it into smaller types of trucks. And if it's really close by the end destination to that terminal in Missouri where it just got sent from Indianapolis, it might be delivered the very next day. If it's still a little bit of a distance away from that terminal that it got sent to in Missouri, you might have it go to yet another terminal. Okay, so there's lots of stops along the way, and it's not the speediest of ways of getting there, but it's cheaper. Okay, and it's a lot cheaper than trying to ship something UPS ground, and it's a lot cheaper than trying to send something via air freight. So it's a good option. Okay, another thing, unfortunately, that you have to think about are claims. Okay, what is a claim? I hate to say it, but LTL carriers, because oftentimes your pallets that you are shipping are oftentimes touched a great deal by their employees, damage sometimes occurs. Okay, and you are definitely going to try to make sure that your shipments are protected as best you can. You're going to wrap them quite well. You are going to put padding on it wherever possible. You might put a sign on top of it. Like I worked at one place that said, "Do not stack on top." And it was like a little pop up tent that would show if you tried to stack something on top of it. Now, myself, the shipper, I didn't stack anything on top of it. It would be the LTL carrier that would sometimes do that in an effort to get things onto a truck. Okay, so you sometimes encounter damage. Sometimes you also encounter theft. Okay, that's another thing. So a lot of times these pallets are very well wrapped with this plastic stretch wrap. Okay, so lots of positives shipping LTL, the price, and they have lots of ability to take those smaller pallet types of loads, but there's other issues. It's a slower type of movement of product, and as well there's claims. There might be damage, there might be pilferage or stealing. Okay, so lots of things to consider when you're shipping LTL. It's a very good option. I don't want to make it sound like it's bad, because there is damage and that there might be theft. That doesn't happen a great deal, but it's something that you have to think about, and it's something that does occur.